You are way too low on Kyler Murray and the rest of these dynasty buys because Kyler Murray is going to be a top 5 quarterback this season. His career per game averages 17.8 his rookie season in 2019. Then we get 23.7 in 2020, 21.5. We're talking Lamar Jackson, Jalen Hurts, Josh Allen tier with these numbers. Then 18.2 in 2022 when he tore his ACL, so only 11 games there. And then 18.4 bouncing back this season. 18.4 is significant because you know who else had 18.4 fantasy points per game this year? Patrick Mahomes. That is Kyler's third worst season, almost second worst season, is what Patrick Mahomes did this year. So if that is his floor, where he doesn't have Marquise Brown for most of this season, where he's coming off an ACL tear, that gives me a lot of optimism for Kyler Murray. I know his per game stats were a little bit lower if you look at it, averaging 250 passing yards in 2020, 270 in 2021, and then 215 and finally, 225 last season. A little bit lower, but when you think about it, 2022, DeAndre Hopkins suspended for 6 games last season. I mean, look at this Marquise Brown, game log right here. The dude didn't play much at all with Kyler Murray, so it's just him, Trey McBride, Michael Wilson, and Rondale Moore. Now he hopefully, more than likely, is going to be adding a Marvin Harrison, maybe a Malik Neighbors. And the big thing for Kyler, what separates a lot of these quarterbacks is the rushing ability. And when you look at these rushing per game stats, you see he's right where he was pre-ACL injury, about 30 rush yards a game, 5 to 6 rush attempts per game. That's what you want to see from Kyler. Obviously, in his big season where he had 23.7, he was a little bit higher, but he's been right around 30 rush yards a game, right around that 5 to 6 rush attempts, averaging probably, 3 to 9, depending on if he scores a touchdown, rushing points per game, which is huge for fantasy. On the other end, he's got an aging running back in James Conner, so he's probably going to be asked a little bit more to run the ball. James Conner's 29, hasn't played a full season, and who knows how long. And the Cardinals, I know they haven't made a ton of moves yet, but like I said, pick 4, pick 27, 35, and then 3 in the third. So hopefully they'll continue to add weapons around Kyler Murray, continuing to add to how good he can be. But like I said, his floor, 18 fantasy points per game. Quarterback 7 last year, Jared Goff, 17.6. Quarterback 8, Patrick Mahomes, 18.4. Automatically, if he has a bad season, he is a top 8 quarterback this next year. He's a guy I would sell Jordan Love for. I would sell Patrick Mahomes plus for. He is the guy that I would go get right now. Next, we've got DJ Moore, who was the wide receiver 6 last year. And if you go back and look how bad this Bears pass attack was, it is a miracle that he was the wide receiver 6. They were second worst in completions, bottom 5 in attempts, yards, and touchdowns, and bottom 10 in completion percentage. Tyler Bajan and Justin Fields, not a great duo if you're trying to be a good fantasy wide receiver. Yet Moore reeled in over 95 receptions on 130 plus targets, 1,300 plus yards, and a career high in touchdowns. Now, albeit that's not a hard number for him to hit because he just was not a touchdown scorer in Carolina. I'll admit that, but 8 touchdowns is, very good. Now, there's a lot of changes this season. They bring in Keenan Allen. Keenan Allen's going to be 32 years old. I love Keenan Allen. If you followed our content, I'm a Keenan Allen apologist. However, he is 32. So at best, you maybe get one more great year out of Keenan Allen. One more year where he's the same dominant guy. But that is the best case scenario. And if we're talking dynasty, DJ Moore, also 26 years old. I know him and Kyler feel like they've been in the NFL for forever. But DJ Moore is only 26. So at worst, you get one great year out of Keenan. He's 27, still has a very, very productive year this season. But from the quarterback perspective, it can only get better from what they saw last year. Justin Fields, you look at his stats, right? I mean, he only had 3 games over 225 yards last year. Only 4 with more than 20 or more completions, and only 2 that were multi-touchdown games. He just didn't get it done from a quarterback passing perspective. And as a fantasy wide receiver, that's what you need. Now they get Caleb Williams coming in, and let's say they throw the average amount of attempts for a team. That's 60 more pass attempts on a season. You already lose Darnell Mooney, who was 90 targets last year. And there you go. You got 150 targets to be split between DJ Moore, adding some more to what he already had last year of 136, and for Keenan Allen to come in and get some as well. DJ Moore should not be going down. And yet, a keep trade cut, he's the wide receiver 18. He's moved down a little bit with the Keenan Allen trade. Now I think is the best buy window before people realize, hey, this connection between DJ Moore and Caleb Williams is special. You need to go get in on it right now. And that now brings us to our third player, Jahan Dotson. And I know not quite as big of a name as DJ Moore or Kyler Murray, especially after he had one of the most disappointing seasons last year of all second-year wide receivers. You look at this tweet from Lucas, one of the other fellas, and after his rookie season, he was comparable to Terry McLaurin over that last stretch. We thought, hey, we're ready for him to break out. This is where Jahan Dotson breaks out, and it just didn't happen because they were using him effectively in 2022. His ADOT was around 13. He had 7 touchdowns. And then you get Eric Bieniemy from the Chiefs, and you think, oh my goodness, finally, they're going to bring some real firepower. And maybe Bieniemy can bring what he did in Kansas City and unlock this offense, but that didn't happen. Bieniemy's out after 1 year. They did throw the ball the most amount of times, but they were the 5th lowest in yards per attempt, and Dotson's ADOT was under 10. So we went from a guy who was super productive, used over the middle of the field, down the field, to, hey, we're going to keep him in short. We're going to split his targets with Curtis Samuel this year. And if you look at the numbers, his over his career, obviously this last season was not great in 2022 or in 2023, but 2022, they did things that worked for Dotson. So you're hoping Cliff Kingsbury comes in, the new regime comes in, they can start to really unlock, quote unquote, Jahan Dotson, or better term, use him effectively, use him to his strengths. Because he did run a ton of routes last year. He just didn't see the ball at all. So that's what we're hoping. They bring in the new quarterback, Jaden Daniels or Drake May. They have the new regime, Cliff Kingsbury, that they're starting to actually use Dotson effectively again. And I think Dotson this year is going to be the poster child, same as Nico Collins was last year, for this post-height sleeper. You can get him so cheap right now. I would go acquire Jahan Dotson, understanding that, hey, he has already shown the flash that he can be really, really good in the NFL, right? We're not just hoping that it can. We've seen it already. Go get Jahan Dotson. At 4, we have Diontae Johnson, and I know what you're probably already thinking. Gross. Disgusting. Get that out of here. I didn't like him on the Steelers. Now you put him on the Panthers with Bryce Young on a team that was terrible last year. You really want me to go pick up on Diontae Johnson? And yes, I do. Last year, he battled injuries, and it was his first season under 8 targets a game, and the Steelers were dysfunctional, right? We had the whole Matt Canada thing. No one on that team was used effectively, including George Pickens, but he has shown an ability. 170 targets in a season, 1,100 yards in a season, 8 touchdowns in a season. I understand the year before, right? He was great target-wise, but he had 0 touchdowns, and he comes out last year with 5. I'm not saying he's going to score a lot of touchdowns with Bryce Young, but this team needs somebody who can make separation. DJ Chark, Terrace Marshall, not separators. Jonathan Mingo, not a separator. Adam Thielen at his age, not a separator. They need somebody who can get open. That's what Diontae Johnson is going to provide for them. And Bryce Young, whether you like him or not, is going to have to throw the ball to somebody. And that somebody is going to be a Diontae Johnson, who, like I've already said, has shown that he can be a target hog. Right now, he is currently the wide receiver 45 on Keep Trade Cut. And I know that isn't gospel. I've mentioned that a couple times. But it does give us a good consensus of where people think he's at. And I do think he's probably 45, might even be high. I've seen him be lower on other sites, Sleeper, Fantasy Pros, closer to that wide receiver 50. And for a guy who has 170 targets in his range of outcomes, I'm not saying that he's going to get 120 receptions. I'm not saying he's going to get 1,500 yards. But the fact that he can get that many targets in his range of outcomes, and he's only 27 years old, and they're signing him to an extension, I think is very exciting from the prospect of getting this guy cheap, getting him after people, have been disappointing the last 2 years, Diontae Johnson is exactly who I would be targeting as a middle wide receiver 2 kind of guy. I'm getting Christian Kirk joining Jacksonville vibes from this. Probably not closer to that wide receiver 12, probably closer to wide receiver 20. But Diontae Johnson is definitely someone I want to acquire. And finally, if you've been following this for a while, I can't believe I'm saying it. You probably can't believe I'm saying it. But Christian Watson is our 5th player who has been plagued by injuries, missing all of training camps the last 2 seasons, weeks 3, 6, and 7 in 2022, and then weeks 1 and 3 and 14 through 18 in 2023, all with a hamstring injury. I'm going to be honest. My biggest miss last year was Jordan Love. I did not think he was legit. I did not think he had what it takes, and he proved me wrong. He comes out, throws 4,100 yards and 32 touchdowns. Now you take Christian Watson, you take this whole team, right? They're all, kind of trying to find their position. Jaden Reed's the wide receiver 29. You got Christian Watson at 40, Romeo Doubs at 48, and then Dontavian Wicks at 55. So you got 4 wide receivers, all under the age of 25, all trying to find, their spot in this offense. And so I think Christian Watson can be that one. In 2022, from weeks 10 to 18, he was the wide receiver 7 in half PPR, wide receiver 4 in points per game. He put up 20 points over his last two healthy games this last season against Detroit and Kansas City, who are very stingy teams. And the guy who is ranked, according to Keep Trade Cut again, as their wide receiver 1, Jaden Reed, didn't really break out, onto the scene, have great games until after Christian Watson went down for injury that second time. You look, I got Christian Watson on the bottom here, Jaden Reed on the top of their game logs when they were both out there together, and there's really not that big of a difference. I think Christian Watson can take that next step, and even if he is the second best wide receiver, we've seen that he can put up these big numbers. We've seen that he can be very productive. So even if he's the wide receiver 2, with Jordan Love playing as well as he did, I think he vastly outperforms wide receiver 40, and he is the 5th guy that you should be going to acquire. Alrighty, guys, that wraps up our top 5 dynasty buys. I hope you enjoyed it. Leave us a comment, drop a like, hit those notifications, hit that subscribe button. We got the podcast coming out tomorrow, and then we got top 5 dynasty sells coming out on Thursday. We'll catch you guys later. Deuces.